I'd like to turn to the topic of warp speed now, and I think you're very pleased to have kind of representatives from many of our cornerstone kind of warp speed customers. We established warp speed with the idea that we wanted to enhance American competitiveness in manufacturing.
America's defense is about to be redefined by AI, and warp speed is leading the charge. Check this video out.
How do we increase throughput? How do we improve quality? How do we decrease costs? How do we do that using our competitive advantage, which we view as software and AI? So I'd love to kind of double click on the work that you guys are all doing with warp speed. But maybe we could start at home, actually. Of course, within Palantir, we use warp speed to manage our Titan program. Sham, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously want to dog food everything you're doing here, and we wanted to set a lighthouse beacon of what could be. I think about often the most important missing strategic asset for the nation is a digital twin that goes from the factory floor to the foxhole, and a way of understanding what are the scenarios in the world on what timelines we care about. That's the foxhole side of this. That's the demand side of the equation. And what is the supply side? What are we making? When are we making it? What are the opportunities we have? Or are the things we're building going to be relevant for the scenarios we care about? And of course, there's volatility to this equation. The world is changing every single day. Any manufacturing company would recognize this as essentially an S&OP process. Like, how are we bringing together the supply and demand side to drive some sort of consensus of what we're doing? And really, as a nation, the department doesn't have this sort of view. That's a big elephant to go eat here. But clearly, we can start with the programs that we're deeply involved in and start providing that sort of visibility that builds that seamless integration amongst all of the parties that are participating in building on the factory floor side to deliver faster, cheaper, on schedule, under budget, and more responsibly, so that you can drive changes. It's not just, are you doing what's according to plan? Doctrinally, we already believe that plans are useless, even if planning is invaluable. Like, no plan survives first contact. What you're really trying to measure with warp speed is, can you adapt to shocks? How quickly can you react to reality? And we're proud to be able to demonstrate that in Titan. The partners who've used it have really loved it. And I think it sets an example of what the department could really be doing more broadly across all of the factory floors.
This is a powerful example of how Palantir leads not just with tech, but with doctrine. They're not simply selling software. They're embedding a new way of thinking into national operations. Warp speed isn't just a tool. It's a philosophy of agility and clarity in a world defined by volatility. From supply chain fragility to real-time battlefield adaptation, Palantir is offering a blueprint for how the public sector can finally close the gap between data and decision-making. In many ways, this is the strategic edge the U.S. has been missing and desperately needs.
Certainly. It's one thing to have your own house in order. It's another thing to be connecting the different houses that have, cross dependencies, for sure. And we're working on this for one program, but Heidi, at L3, you have 1,000 programs. And I know that you have, a particular philosophy around program steering and how AI can help in that regard. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. And Sham, I'm going to first riff off of what you said, because I like to challenge people internally when we have conversations and invite people to think about the next 10 years, right? Let's go into 2035. And you say to yourself, do we think the world is going to get less volatile, the same volatility, or more volatile, right? And you find everyone, when you ask the question, says, oh my gosh, it's going to get more volatile. And then you say, okay, now you're a $22 billion company and we want to grow. What do we need to change within ourselves to be ready for not only today, but where things are going to head tomorrow? And the answer is, we need to be more agile, adaptable. We need to be able to pivot very, very quickly. And one of the themes that our CEO has is that we want to be a trusted disruptor. And I'm going to focus on the disruption element of that in my answer. So there's what we're doing with warp speed. Think of it in two buckets. One is what we're doing operationally. And there are a number of ways that we're using Palantir really effectively. One is that we have, I'm trying to remember the name of it, MRP speed over at IVS, right? And that is enabling us to do material resource planning quicker through the digital ecosystem. At IVS, that's at IVS. At TCOM, we are, trying to think about the, we've been ingesting information so that we can see country of origin. And we're also using TCOM AI so that our junior technicians can type in answers through a text and they get a reply with citing sources, et cetera. And then we are using a combination that that puts together the MBOM, the EBOM, and engineering change drawings so that we're able to see where there's some inefficiencies or where we can find or free up inventory. We saved $3.3 million in inventory in just a few weeks by doing that. So that's where we're sort of putting things digitally on the shop floor. And then in terms of transformation, one of the kind of the lifeblood of aerospace and defense companies is program management. And no one really does it all that well. And part of the reason why they don't do it well is that you use lots of disparate systems and they don't talk to each other, and then you're trying to get information at different times and you can't see the full picture. So we are running something called Program Digital Cockpit, and we're doing it in a sprint. And we took 7 programs across our 4 segments, and we are merging all of the different capabilities, the weeklies, the weekly financials, the monthly financials, the risks and opportunities, all the elements that build up into a program management so that we can see it in real time, and that's going to enable all of our people to harmonize on the data and pivot with greater agility. And then we're going to think of the upside down pyramid. We're going to then take that through all of our programs so that we can enable our people to innovate rapidly with confidence. They can harmonize on data. People can collaborate. We think that's going to enable us to be a much more agile organization, even as large as we are.
What's compelling here is the fusion of operational efficiency with strategic readiness. Real-time visibility, harmonized data, and AI-supported decision-making. These aren't just buzzwords anymore. They're becoming the baseline for survival in a more volatile world. As traditional systems collapse under complexity, Palantir is offering the architecture to actually make sense of it all. And in doing so, they're not just supporting transformation. They're defining what the new standard has to be across defense and industry in the 2030s.
For sure. And having kind of those two perspectives is, I think, critically important, both the operator and then being able to percolate that information up. If you're using something like MRP speed to kind of manage the IVF program, you have very granular information about material movements, which can then present more kind of high fidelity information as you kind of surface that across many different programs.
And exactly, and when we have like engineering changes, we shouldn't have our people having to run calculations and new calculations when that can be done automatically, and then that frees up. So I believe very passionately, I think our leadership team does too, that innovation doesn't just come from the top. In fact, it comes at the grassroots level. So the real thrust is to enable and empower the grassroots folks who are encountering the problems real hand, and to empower them to solve them and be able to see the information and then communicate it back up through their supervisors, because everyone is seeing it. And I think therefore you get more harmonization on the reasons why you do what you do. And I think that's going to be really exciting. I think that people should go to work happy and empowered. And when people are fearful, you don't have like full scope of vision. But when you're having a great time, your aperture opens up, right? So if you want innovation, you have to have happy, empowered people. And I think taking away kind of the work that is discouraging and debilitating and sort of boring, taking that away and enabling people at the grassroots level to kind of really bring their A game, I think that's going to be hella fun. I can't wait to see what that's going to produce.
Absolutely.
Isn't this the future we've been promised, but rarely see delivered? A workplace where the front line isn't just executing orders, but actively shaping strategy, because they finally have the data to do it. Palantir's ecosystem is proving that bottom-up innovation isn't just a cultural ideal. It can be engineered. That's the true mark of transformative software.
And I'm also struck just by the number of different basically manufacturing and engineering challenges that exist across L3, but also across all of your organizations, from tactical radios to night vision goggles to aircraft. And I think that's certainly true at SNC. We're working with SEOC and the Hades program. And first of all, I think people would love to learn more about the Doomsday plane and the Hades program. But secondly, I think that there's a very interesting challenge for SNC, which is that you need to bring to bear the full collective knowledge of your engineering organization in order to design the best planes, but you're making maybe 4 of them. So how do you kind of navigate that dynamic?
So one thing I will go back on and talk about from the digital twinning perspective, which you brought up, and I think it's a great point. And you referenced the digital twinning across everything from the start to the finish, the life cycle. S&C years ago, we weren't focused on merging and integrating. You and I have spent a lot of time talking about this, Heidi.
Yeah.
Is the disparate organizations that you have to spend a lot of time trying to get to that source of truth in the data from disparate systems that don't talk to each other, and it's very time consuming. And S&C really has organically grown as a single entity for its history, for the most part. And so one of the things that we started and launched and started before I got here, and it was great to see the effort that had been, the groundwork that had been laid and the effort that had been accomplished, is really about making a commitment to digital transformation years ago, which allowed us to start with the transactional layer of our company and creating a transactional digitization, so when we get to that point where the tools and the resources are there, we can exploit those resources more efficiently. And so what we are reaching for, and I'll talk about SAOC and the Hades program in a second, is we're reaching for what is best described as a digital exoskeleton, because the digital twins reside within that exoskeleton, which is the life cycle of a program, product, technology, or capability from the time that you start to the end. And the tools that we're pulling in aren't just about the ERP to MRP integration, aren't just about how we're going to create efficiency. Efficiency should be a byproduct of continuous improvement, not necessarily just a byproduct of the tools and resources. But what this does is allows us to say we're creating intertwined digital threads with integrity throughout the entire digital exoskeleton of our development, that at the point when we're out supporting that program or product 30 years from now, and this is where it's important for a program like SAOC, that program's going to be around for 30, 40, possibly even 50 years. And that's the life cycle, normal life cycle of a major aircraft modification. So the continuity of that digital thread and the ability to take the software tools that Palantir is bringing to the table allows us to ensure that we are analyzing that entire digital thread, and every time we can find a fray very, very efficiently, they can be corrected. They can be analyzed, they can be understood, we can address those variations, and we can increase the integrity of the design, development, and support work we're doing, especially when we're continuously modifying those platforms. SAOC program, the Survival Airborne Operations Center, you called it the Doomsday Plane. It's a collection of aircraft that are used to further enhance national security for nuclear command and control. 747-8I, very large aircraft, so even though it's a small number, this is a major aircraft modification. Interesting thing about airplane modification is you can have two airplanes come off the assembly line together and they are not identical. And this is even more critically important for us to establish what that digital thread baseline is down to the individual modifications of that aircraft, because there will be variations. It's not like the high volume manufacturing line that we see in the night vision world where you're producing tens of thousands of widgets. You use data to identify variations so you can improve your yields and you can improve your quality and your performance to deliver your product. In very unique developments like the SAOC or the Hades program, where there are aircraft modifications in a small fleet, use the data to manage the variations and give you better control, configuration management control of those variations throughout the life cycle and throughout the life cycle upgrades. And we see a lot of benefit from the tools that we're already starting to analyze and plug and play into the S&C ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. This isn't just about solving today's data silos. It's about designing ecosystems that can flex and adapt for decades. Whether you're building tens of thousands of units or modifying just 4 strategic aircraft, the stakes are the same: integrity, control, and visibility. Palantir's stack is proving versatile enough to handle both the macro and the micro, aligning tactical execution with strategic longevity. That's the kind of software backbone you want behind next-gen defense programs.
For sure.
One of the things that's really important, I just want to riff off that for a second, is that on the shop floor, to John's point, there's a lot of tribal knowledge that goes on because you've got one plane that's different from the other. We have that in Greenville and Waco. And one of the things that Palantir has been helping us with is we're creating apps so that the technicians and those on the floor can then use an app on their phone to then start to put in information, which I think is going to be really important in terms of capturing that tribal knowledge digitizing it so that it enables to be transferred. So if some guy has been around for 39 years and he's got all this knowledge in his head, we start to get that out of him, right? But he's not sitting at a desk, right? He's on the floor working. Get that captured through an app, and then that enables there to be a cohesive knowledge thread that is able to go over the span of decades, like John's programs and ours. And I think that's going to be really, really important, because there is those hidden elements that a guy knows inside that he's been working on it forever. It's like, oh, you got to do it this way. How do you capture that? And I think now that we're beginning to solve that and appreciate the importance of tribal knowledge, but then digitizing that, I think that's going to be really exciting.
Not only for the employees, but for the government as well.
Digitizing tribal knowledge might be one of the most overlooked but consequential levers in modern defense manufacturing. What Palantir is enabling here goes far beyond deploying an app. It's about institutionalizing decades of hard-earned expertise and making it accessible in real time where it matters most. When technicians on the floor contribute directly to the digital ecosystem, they're not just logging information, they're shaping the future of mission-critical systems. This creates a living, breathing thread of insight that spans programs, product cycles, and personnel turnover. It's a model for true continuity, one where operational wisdom scales alongside technological evolution. And that's not just important for the enterprise, it's a strategic asset for national defense in the decades ahead.